Welcome back to Beyond the Sermon with Hyde Park United Methodist Church in Tampa, Florida. I'm Matt Hotho, the Director of Production and Online Engagement.
And I'm Sally Campbell-Evans, the Pastor for Congregational Care.
So Sally, we've been in this sermon series, Living Amen. You preached a sermon just a moment ago about Thomas Merton, a Trappist monk, and well known for this prayer that we discussed today from his book, Thoughts on Solitude. Mm-hmm. And it starts with these lines, I do not know where I'm going. I do not know the path ahead, but I trust in some way that doing this is pleasing to God. Right?
That's the capsule version.
Yes. I'm not saying I got it exactly right. Yeah, the encapsulated version. And in your journey, you were talking about a retreat that you took for 12 days where you went and journeyed and you didn't know where you were going necessarily.
Right.
So let's start on that journey, because one of the wonderful things about Sally Campbell-Evans is she journals everything.
On my travels.
On your travels.
I don't really do it when I'm just at home, but yes. So yes, I have a journal from 2012. In the sermon, I mentioned that I took a 12-day journey. It came at a time when I was working at two churches and I had done a lot of funerals, and someone on the staff parish said, "What can we do to make you feel more supported?" And I said, "A sabbatical." And they said, "How long?" I said, 2 weeks. They were
so you were in the Presbyterian church at this time.
I was at a Methodist church and a Presbyterian church.
Okay, you were at were you at St. Paul's?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah.
St. Paul's and Faith Presbyterian.
Okay, and so, but you weren't appointed to a Methodist church at the time, were you?
I was hired at both of them.
Okay, so you didn't have access to things like renewal leave.
Correct.
Okay,
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So they offered this gift, and I said, 2 weeks, done. 2 weeks, has to be in the year of 2012. It has to be, there's no money attached to it, and Clark can't go with you. But those are the, I said, fine. So I took a trip by myself, and it was just glorious. So when the Merton prayer talks about, I don't know where I'm going, I didn't know where I was going every day. I had some big things mapped out, but one of the days I ended up going to to the first churches that I ever served, the first summer of ministry. So I was in a little area of the western part of Virginia called Falling Spring, Sinking Spring, and Tinkling Springs, 3 little country churches.
Those were the churches.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
You preach here, and then you drive up the mountain. You preach here, and you drive up the mountain. So I found Falling Spring Presbyterian Church, and I go there, and it looked just like it had in 1984 when I had served there. And I'm on this journey by myself, and me and God, and I walk around the white covered church, and then I walk out to the cemetery, and I'm like this beeline to this gravestone. And on the way there, I'm saying, Gracie Martin. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, there was Grace B. Martin, August 1984. It was the first funeral I had ever officiated.
Wow.
And that's my role. I mean, I do a lot of funerals, and I've been doing funerals for a while. And so I literally just sat down on the ground and cried. I mean, it was like this holy moment of saying, God, I got it. I thought I was going to be a missionary. I thought I was going to do something else. And yet here I am, loving working in a local church, continue to walk with people on their journey.
So you're on a 12-day journey that you don't know where you're going, and you're realizing that you've actually been on a 28-year journey where you didn't know where you were going.
Exactly.
And God was with you through
every
that
step.
entire thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Quick question about your 3 churches. Did their size also match the size of the water flow?
Yeah.
Falling, sprinkling, tinkling?
Pretty much. Falling was the biggest.
Yeah, that would make sense. Sprinkling would have been maybe a little bit
That's right.
smaller?
Yeah. Oh, the top of the mountain was the smallest.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. Gotcha. So that was in 1984 when you were there. But so 2012, you're taking this journey. And were there other moments on this trip that stood out to you? Let's just highlight a few other moments.
So when I got to Cincinnati, Ohio, I'm having my first evening with some friends there. And they said, "Oh, did we tell you that tomorrow evening we're having dinner with Walter Brueggemann?" Well, Walter Brueggemann, a lot of us.
Prolific Old Testament scholar.
Mm-hmm. We love writing. And I remember just him talking about that night. He talked about living out of abundance and not out of scarcity. At dinner table, he's talking about we should live out of abundance and not out of scarcity. That was a holy moment too. The journey continued. The next day we went for a walk my friend Becky and I passed a church and I said, Tom Schumann, I think I went to seminary with that guy. So we went and knocked on the church door and they said, oh, he's doing devotional with the nursery. And he came out and he said, hey, I know you. Tom Schumann writes lectionary liturgies, online.
Okay. Yeah.
And ever since 1984, we communicate weekly on Facebook because of that trip. I mean, there's just so many wonderful things. I got to Cincinnati, to Louisville, Kentucky, where Thomas Merton actually had lived out from in the Trappist monastery there. And there's this place on the corner of Walnut and 4th. There's a marquee in Louisville that says, I've got a picture of it. I'll share it with you. But all of a sudden he's overwhelmed by this holy moment. Thomas Merton is. And he said, I realized that everybody here, if they could just know how beautiful they are, that they are all walking around like the light of the sun, like every one of them is made in the image of God. And he had this amazing moment. And he said, if everybody could know that about who they are and who everyone else is, there would be no more war. There would be no more disagreement. We would recognize that we are all God's. So that is Louisville. So there were just so many moments. And then I finally get to a spiritual retreat center where I spend several days by myself the second week. And I do it with Thomas Merton in the form of a retreat. Thomas has died by this point. Yes, he died in 1968, I believe. But I just read some of his writings.
Okay.
And my whole journal is just full of, I'm loving this Thomas Merton, or so many points about just solitude and how if we would just take the time to be contemplative about anything, it kind of grounds us in what direction to go. But he also became very adamant about peacemaking and became saying that that's really the only way to be, by the end of his life, he was saying that's really the only way to be a Christian is to be peaceful.
Okay. And then is this at the retreat where you also had the prayer labyrinth walk?
Yes, it is. So at this retreat, I did my first yoga that I remember doing. This, again, is 2012. And then I went to the spiritual direction and I met a couple of ladies. And just like the prayer says, I do not know where I'm going. And that not knowing, sometimes it makes us more open and more bold and more, I don't know, sometimes maybe courageous. And so I got one of their numbers and I called this lady up the next day. I said, hey, you want to meet for lunch or dinner tomorrow? And she said, we'll meet for lunch. And I did. We met at a restaurant, this little town in Tennessee. We talked until dinner time, just blah, 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 blah. You know how you do when you made a new friend that you've got so much in common with. And she said, how about join me tonight? It's a full moon. And meet me at the full moon at such and such a time at the prayer labyrinth. And it was pitch dark all the way around except for the moon. And we walked this labyrinth and it was a holy moment. It was just a holy, holy time. So there were just so many moments on this journey of unknowing and yet being surprised by the grace of God.
Well, and it felt like you opened yourself up to those experiences over those 2 weeks.
Absolutely. And I wish I would do it more often. I wish we all would.
Yeah. So when was that in 2012?
2012.
Summertime or?
October.
Okay. Gotcha. So this is reminding me of a trip that I took where I kind of just was at a really wandering moment in my life in 2010. So I would have been 24. So kind of different life stages, but so I didn't have a lot of stuff to tap into to go back and visit, but it was more of like, I need to get away and I need to do some work of just figuring out what I want to be doing in my life. I was dealing with understanding my calling, understanding my relationship with my dad, understanding other male influences that I had in my life and trying to piece all this together. And I went up to the Blue Ridge Mountains and was able to do a timeshare, I guess, that my parents had or something like that and stay in a place. And I remember I would go for hikes. I would be reading a bunch of stuff, but here's one of those moments where I think it was something serendipitous happened, something that I could not have expected happened. So I was out hiking and I lost my car keys.
Oh.
And I couldn't get my car, basically, right? And I had a spare set back at the house. I ran into this family with 3 young kids, and they drove me back to my place where I grabbed my car keys, got my car, and then I realized I had left my backpack in their car.
Oh,
and we had no way to contact each
no.
other. And by the grace of God, like, they remembered how to get to my place, showed up there, gave me the backpack, and we stayed connected over social media then for like 6 or 7 years after that. And it was just one of those moments where the world got really bigger. Like, the world just expanded in some way because you had to trust on other people, had to rely on other people. And I was just out there trying to understand what's going on in my life. And I don't know, it was like I'd opened myself up to new experiences, and these people were there to be a part of that, I guess. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if it's different than your stories because it was at a very different time in life.
But still, you were open. Well, you had to reach out for help. Not knowing what to do makes us more creative. Reaching out for help is, not knowing what's the next thing to do. You just got to make a choice.
Yeah.
And you reached out to these folks, and they were, by the grace of God, lovely humans that helped you out and became friends.
Yeah.
And then came back for you. So yes, it's very much, I think, just being open. And the whole reason you were there was searching. And aren't we all searching?
Yeah.
We're all searching.
Yeah. So you got one final story that you shared with me from this experience where you met one of your sons at college, and then met a friend of your sons at college. Let's end on that story, because I think that's just one of those fun serendipitous moments.
Yeah. So I was telling the sermon that I took this journey because there was a lot going on in my life personally, but also it was the first time Clark and I were becoming empty nesters, because our daughter Abby was in college, but Ben and Zach were freshmen, their first year of college. So Ben had come home for fall break, and I drove him to see his brother, Zach, at Stetson. And in my journal, I say how much fun it was to meet some of Zach's friends from college, his new friends. He particularly wants me to meet his big brother in the fraternity, Eric. Well, that was in 2012. I met Eric Ebersole. Who knew that 5 years later he would marry my daughter? So, that was just, to reread that in the journal was so much fun. Yeah. And to think, God, wow, just little tidbits along the way that sometimes we don't see how God is acting in our lives until afterwards.
Yeah.
That's very often true. But sometimes we get to see it in the moment as well. And I think Thomas Merton's prayer opens us up to trusting God, that God is going to give us some direction, trusting that we don't know where the journey's going. We have some concerns about life in the world right now, but God's with us, and our guide is trustworthy indeed.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much, Sally, for sharing that experience that you had in 2012,
Sure.
for helping us connect that with Thomas Merton's prayer, but also hopefully for you listening or watching, you connected with that value of seeing how everything's connected in some ways, right? Taking those moments to get away, to reflect on the journey that's been, or in my case, to get away just to start creating these spaces where you might have time to reflect on them in the future. Sometimes that time to get away from the busyness of life is holy space.
Absolutely.
And gives us that place to connect with God in new ways that we might be able to look back on as touchstones in the future. So thanks so much for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Sermon. You can go to our next steps link down in the show notes or at the bottom of this video to find other ways to connect with our church through small groups, summer pop-ups, or joining us for worship on any Sunday. I'm so glad you joined us. I'm Matt Hotho.
I'm Sally Campbell-Evans.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.